Legend Total War here, and today we're doing another tier list using Tier Maker, this time covering the Tzeentch unit roster tier list. Now I believe this is the last of the Warhammer 3 races to cover. I think I've covered all of them after this one. Now before we get into the actual tier list itself, I do need to let you guys know that this video here is sponsored by Instant Gaming. There are some really great Steam sales going on at the moment, but Instant Gaming sometimes even beats the Steam sales, right? So Conan Exiles is a game that I play on and off a little bit, mostly with my wife on single player. Highly recommend it. Ever since launch, it's gotten a whole of a lot better, and there's a big update coming soon. So if this is a game that you're particularly interested in, then you can get it at a great price on Instant Gaming. Just to give a comparison, it's 83% off on Instant Gaming, subject to stock available. If we compare it to Steam, which is currently at 50% off, I can still get it 1/3 the price on Instant Gaming than I can on Steam. I've never had any issues using Instant Gaming. Never had any of the keys be rejected. But on the off chance that you do purchase a bung key, you can very easily get a refund. They've got a great refund policy. So I've never had any issues with Instant Gaming, and I highly recommend them. So if you're looking for a bit of a change, go and check out Instant Gaming. Anyway, let's get into the tier list now. So the roster for Tzeentch is actually quite small. There's only a handful of units, but there's variety in terms of utility. So let's get into the infantry side of things first. So the Forsaken of Tzeentch. So Forsaken in general are not really the best of units, but because of their barrier, the Tzeentch Forsaken are actually quite a reliable unit. They've got magical attacks, they've got decent amount of armor, no physical resistance, unlike most of the other units here, apart from the Knights. But for a tier 1 unit, essentially, the Forsaken are actually quite a staple unit. So I'm just going to put them at B tier, because they're just like, okay, they do their job, you can rely on them. I wouldn't spam them, but putting a few of them in your army is not a bad thing. Then we've got the Blue Horrors of Tzeentch. Now, this one here is a bit weird because this is such a versatile unit, and it's so easy to replace in global recruitment because it doesn't require a military building in most cases, right? So once you've got 10 settlements, you can essentially globally recruit them in one turn, allowing you to spam these units, and if they get killed, I just don't care because they're so replaceable. So I'm actually going to put the Blue Horrors of Tzeentch in A tier, because they're a missile unit. They've got decent amount of missile damage, not a lot of ammunition, but then they can also be used in melee. They've got pretty good amount of barrier, 160 entities. They can really do a lot for you. In my Tzeentch campaigns, I have managed to run with Blue Horrors all the way up until the late game in many cases, and they're quite efficient, but obviously not their strongest unit. Then you've got the Pink Horrors over here. So obviously an upgraded version of the Horror. The downside to it, though, is that it has 80 entities instead of 160, or depending on what your unit scale is, it's half that of the Blue Horrors. They've got less overall health, but more health per entity, less overall barrier, way more ammunition, and way more range. So this one, the Blue Horror is actually classified more as a melee infantry unit with sort of like a side of ammunition, whereas the Pink Horror is an actual missile unit. So having a mix of Blue Horrors as the front line to just soak up damage, and Pink Horrors behind them can be really effective. This one here is a little bit more difficult to globally recruit quickly because you need a lot of the barracks buildings, but their base time to recruit is just one turn. So I'm going to put this one here at A tier as well, because it is pretty good in terms of its price point and what its utility is. Then we've got the Exalted Pink Horrors. Now I'm going to put this one at S tier, despite the fact that there are things that I don't really like about them. Let's just go over all the things. So it's a tier 3 unit. It takes 2 turns to recruit normally. Now normally I would disqualify that from S tier for a tier 3 unit, just like what I did with the Exalted Demonettes. However, there is additional utility with the Exalted Pink Horrors. For one thing, their stats are just way better than the Blue Horror and the Pink Horrors. So they got 80 entities, same as the Pink Horrors. They have a lot more missile damage, they got the same range, I think the same amount of ammunition, but what makes these ones here especially useful is that they act as a half arcane conduit, giving you 20% extra recharge rate. Now as Tzeentch, you're going to want to generate as much winds of magic as possible, so putting these in your army allows your other spellcasters, because no matter what lord you've got, it's always going to be a spellcaster, allows them to just cast spells like absolute crazy, even if you're not even using these guys in the battle itself. So these are very useful, even just for that. Then we go on to the Flamers of Tzeentch. So, the multi-entity one. Actually, I'm not entirely sure which one's which. I know that's the Burning Chariot. Hang on, I got the game open. Let me just quickly check. Which one's which? Okay, where are you? Where are you? Flamers. Okay, here we are. So, okay, I've got it in the right order. I just wasn't sure which thumbnail was which. Yeah, this is the multi-entity one. Okay, the Flamers of Tzeentch. Where are we going to put them? These are very good units. Only tier 3, it's not too difficult to get them. These are definitely like an anti-infantry unit. I wouldn't be using them against single entities. That's what the Exalted one is for. I'm going to put this one at probably I'll put it at A tier, because these guys can do tons of damage. The biggest downside to them though is like there's not a lot of ammunition. They can be quite inaccurate, and they can inflict a lot of friendly fire, which shouldn't be too much of a problem if you know how to use them. They're definitely not S tier worthy, but if you're good with them, you can do a lot of damage with them. Then we've got the Exalted Flamer of Tzeentch. I'm going to put this one as well at A tier, because it's getting a little bit pricey at these points, because Tzeentch does make a fair bit of money, but there are definitely better units in his roster. This one here has, I wouldn't be using it so much against big blobs of infantry, although you can do that. Because of the massive amounts of damage that each shot does, this unit here is actually really good against single entities. So this is your ranged option for getting rid of lords, I suppose, outside of like single entity duelists in the Tzeentch roster. So different utilities you want to, if you're going to use them, mix them up in terms of what you want to put in your army. I wouldn't spam one or the other, but putting a couple of them in each of your armies can be quite effective. And then we've got the Burning Chariot of Tzeentch. Now this one here, despite being the highest tier of the Flamers, I'm actually going to put it at B tier, because this one in terms of its cost is not very effective. It has like half the amount of ammunition of the Exalted Flamer. It is a flying single entity, so it's got a lot of mobility, and that's where its cost really comes in. But it only has 9 base ammunition, which isn't a whole lot. If you've it's supposed to be like really good at taking out single entities, but the problem with it is that it just doesn't really have enough ammunition to really do out a lot of damage. And then using it in melee after that just isn't really that good. So I just find that even if you use these guys perfectly, they're not great balance of power pushers, just because they have a very low amount of ammunition. Generally speaking, you can get more out of the Exalted Flamer than the Burning Chariot. This one here is great if you're in a battle where the odds are already in your favor, but if the odds aren't in your favor and you need balance of power pushers, I find that this unit here can really let you down. It's just not good at dishing out loads and loads of damage relative to its cost, unless it's attacking extremely high value units. But if you're like going up against level 1 Cathay Lords, using their ammunition might actually hurt you more than helping. So yeah, a bit of an iffy unit. Then we've got the Chaos Knights of Tzeentch. These are actually really good. Despite being relatively slow cavalry with like 66 base speed, for a cavalry unit, it's not too bad. I'm only going to put it at B tier, because the speed lets them down, but the fact that they've got barrier makes cycle charging with them a lot more useful, because you go in, charge into something, they'll take some damage trying to get out, but it's mostly just a barrier. You go back out, recharge the barrier, charge back in. So in a lot of cases where other cavalry from other factions, which have the exact same stats, will cycle charge and just get worn out over time, Chaos Knights of Tzeentch, if microed correctly, can continue to cycle charge and just never take damage. Also, they're just, generally speaking, good in a fight. Definitely not perfect, but as for a knight cavalry unit that's relatively slow, this one here is relatively reliable. Then we've got the Doom Knights of Tzeentch. So this one here is like more comparable to Pegasus Knights. They got like 12 entities, they're flying units, a lot of damage. Go and land them. They can get stuck. But these are some really good units. I've never tried a Doom stack with them before, but I believe one is possible. I'm going to put this one at A tier, although you could argue the point of putting them in S tier. I just think that there are better units in the Tzeentch roster that deserve the S tier spot, things that have a lot more utility. But this is a very solid cavalry unit. You know, with the barrier, you can use it to, you know, waste enemy ammunition because they will shoot at it, and harass missile units really effectively. Tons of armor, lots of damage. But yeah, just be careful about sending it right into a melee blob because they'll have a hard time getting out of it because they don't have tons of mass. And you know, sometimes when they land right into the middle of it, so you just got to be careful with it. Then we've got the spawn of Tzeentch. Chaos Spawn in general will always hit D tier with me because I find that their utility is rubbish. These are low skill ceiling units, and what I mean by that is that even if you use them perfectly, you're not going to get amazing value out of it. The reason for it is their animations suck because they mostly just stand still. They're terrible at dodging missiles. These ones here are okay considering they've got barrier. Them being unbreakable sometimes actually hurts them more than helping. These can be designed to like hold the line, but they're big and they're easy targets, and because of their animations, even if they're unbreakable, they just die really quickly, and they don't really dish out a lot of damage. So I really think that Chaos Spawn in general are just complete trash across the board because of their sort of all of the massive weaknesses that they might have. Increasing their melee attack, they're giving them barrier, all this kind of stuff doesn't mitigate the fact that their animations are terrible. They're super easy to shoot, super easy in melee to kill because they're big and it's easy to surround them, and they're unbreakable. So they tend to be like some of your first casualties in any particular battle. But and they also don't have physical resistance. I mean, neither do the Chaos Knights because they're mortal, but I know these guys here, they're just lacking in terms of utility. Then we've got the Chaos Furies of Tzeentch. So these are pretty good in the early stages of the campaign, but that's all I would really use it for. I'm going to put it at C tier because in terms of flying units, you've got a lot more utility in other units in the Tzeentch roster. Tzeentch has got a lot of flying options, especially with the Doom Knights of Tzeentch or the Lord of Change. We'll get that in a minute. But the primary reason why I would get Chaos Furies is obviously to harass missile units, but also to take out towers in siege battles. Although the horrors are quite capable of doing that, or your flying lords are capable as well. Overall, just sort of okay units. And then we've got the Screamers of Tzeentch. Now, this one here is a bit of a weird one because it looks on paper to be a similar sort of utility as the Doom Knights, but honestly, I think these are complete trash. So I'm going to put these at C tier because they serve sort of like the same role, but in terms of what you can do with them compared to the Doom Knights of Tzeentch, I just find that unless these guys here are only attacking like the weakest enemy units, they will just die instantly. So they don't trade well for their bounce of power. I nearly put them in D tier. It's just that I vastly consider that Chaos Spawn are worse than Screamers of Tzeentch. But generally speaking, this is not a good unit and I don't really recommend recruiting it. Then we've got the Soul Grinder of Tzeentch. This is just an amazing unit through and through, and that's really where we're reserving the S tier for, right? Because it's a missile unit that's good against single entities, so that way when you don't have to rely on your flamers, it's got long range, and it's got barrier. Of course, all of the Tzeentch units have barrier, and it's also really good in melee, and they've got physical resistance, so this one here has a lot of utility. If you're running with Kairos Fateweaver, you can also heal them. So really good unit, the Soul Grinders of Tzeentch. Generally speaking, all of the Soul Grinders are S tier across all of the different Chaos factions. Then we've got the Lord of Change. Now, had this been a few patches ago, I would have put the Lord of Change as A tier. You know, with the Soul Grinder being above it. However, with the latest change, where instead of using up Winds of Magic, they've got bound spells, I'm actually going to put this one at S tier. And with the patch notes that I've already read, maybe a bit ahead of you guys, there are additional things that are coming to make the demon ones even better. So I'm not going to tell you what exactly they are because I'm still under NDA with that. Nor am I going to make a video on the patch notes. But What's coming is going to make Lords of Change even better, especially in the late stage campaign. But yeah, this is a unit that's got a good amount of barrier, good amount of utility. They're very derpy in melee because of their size and just derpiness. They're very good in sieges because you get them on the wall and they can just knock everyone off the walls quite easily. But having a bound spell of the Gates of Tzeentch, that is one of the most devastating spells in the game, even when not overcasted. So having a bunch of these, or even just one of them casting these bound spells, can easily do its value in any battle. You know, taking out single entities with the Blue Fire of Tzeentch, routing units. I don't think the imagine actually the bound spell where you absorb some of their winds of magic. That actually could be good if it actually worked. I think that the one is sometimes bugged. But yeah, all of their bound spells are extremely useful, and it's good that it no longer requires winds of magic. Anyway, that is the Tzeentch unit roster tier list. A lot of good units in the Tzeentch roster, and you can really make most of this stuff work. The only unit that I would really avoid personally are the Chaos Spawn. In my opinion, this just doesn't fit the Tzeentch playstyle. It's, you know, relatively slow. Their utility just isn't quite there compared to the other units. I could just get way better results out of these guys here. You know, I get that some people probably like the Chaos Spawn, but me personally, I just think that they're just a low utility unit, and I always value utility over stats. Even though a lot of high utility units also have good stats. Those units usually end up in S tier, like for example the Lord of Change and the Soul Grinder as an example. Anyway, that's the end of this one here, guys. It's not a huge roster, but that's it, all of it gone through. I guess we'll come back to Tzeentch once it's got a few more DLC and its roster is expanded by twice as much, which that could be a year from now. Anyway, don't forget to check out Instant Gaming, link in the description. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time, fuckers.